Hello guys, this is Clint from Lotus Games. I thought it'd be kind of neat for me to discuss the current progress and the redevelopment of Didgery. Didgery is an interesting little game. It's a mix of solitaire, bejeweled, and, depending on how you play it, chess. But Didgery doesn't have a very successful history. I released it first on the Xbox Live Indie Arcade, and it didn't do nearly as well as I wanted it to do. Then I released it on PC. It pretty much flopped. People actually enjoy Didgery. I used to think that people didn't, but when I was looking at the reviews in general from both players and from professional independent reviewers, I saw that people like the game quite a bit, actually. I mean, Didgery's got a 9.5 out of 10 on Indie City, a 9.5 out of 10 on Indie DB. I've had several people come to me and say that this game is, Didgery is very underappreciated. I'm sitting on a game here that could potentially have a really big audience. It could reach a lot of people, but there's some problem with Didgery that's preventing people from playing it. It's important to seek out and remove barriers to allow people to actually be able to get into the game. You don't want people being turned off, which is currently what's happening. So I began looking at the core causes of why people weren't playing Didgery. Why weren't they getting into it? One of the main causes I came up with is the trailer. I've had numerous comments. The trailer is pretty much awful. The core reason that they find it awful is the phrase, girdle your loins. Now I'm a fan of old writing. The Bible, I like the Ancient Book of Yasher, Moby Dick, Sherlock Holmes, and they have very flowery text. Gird your loins is a phrase in the Bible that pretty much just means, prepare yourself. I mistakenly thought that people could know what it meant, but they didn't. They just found it a major turnoff. I don't know what went through their heads when they read this, but apparently it was remarkably disturbing. Another problem with the trailer was how long it was. It was incredibly long, and it didn't really explain the game much. Here's some exploding cards, there's a little bit of a storyline, and here's some floating clouds. So I was trying to inject the atmosphere of Didgery into a trailer. I've learned that the trailer should be left to get somebody interested in the game, and if people don't understand or can't relate to, then people aren't going to play the game. Another problem is the description. The description also uses the phrase gird your loins. Girdle your loins. It doesn't describe what the game is at all. The description and the video, the trailer for the game, need to just hook the player. They need to get their interest. So the current description, sort of a work in progress, is Didgery is a unique puzzler that blends the addictive qualities of Bejeweled and Solitaire with the depth of chess. Unlock story fragments, discover special cards, and immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the most epic card puzzle combination of all time. It describes what the game's about, gets right to the point. People reading this will know if they want to play the game right off or not, and I'm hoping that more people then now would be like, hey, this could be a cool game to try out, instead of just reading girdle your loins and running away in fear. Another major barrier with Didgery is the tutorial. If people actually get into the game, then the tutorial is likely to turn them off. It's at least 8 minutes long. It can easily be 10 minutes. I watched the indie game promoter play through the tutorial. 10 minutes later, after he was finished with it, he still couldn't play the game. I mean, that's really terrible. If you have a 10-minute tutorial, it should be crystal clear how the game's played. So it's obvious that the tutorial as it stands right now is just absolute junk. It needs to be completely redone. The best way I can see of doing it is doing a piecewise tutorial. Many puzzle games on tablets and phones use a similar mechanic. Basically, you describe a little bit of the gameplay and let the player play the game. The tutorial is sort of interactive. Only little bits and pieces at a time, not huge 8-minute chunks of your time. This gets the player playing the game immediately. Instant gratification! Another one of the core problems with Didgery was that it just supported one mode, and that mode was what I now call Nightmare Mode. It starts out sort of Zen-like, but you're battling this curse, and the curse affects all the elements. Their energy level is constantly dropping. Once their energy level drops down to 0, the element breaks. And the goal of Didgery is to make chains of cards, and the chains restore the energy to these elements. So you're fighting this curse. It's kind of like a battle. You will always lose. When you get to around level 45, the game becomes just impossibly difficult. People didn't like this. Drinking the Mountain Dew. My current plan is to restructure Didgery so that instead of focusing around a Nightmare mode, it instead focuses around a Zen mode. This has, I believe, a number of advantages. Firstly, it allows the player to ease into the game. There's no stress in this. There's no levels. It just goes on infinitely. When you run out of a deck, a new deck just comes in. You just play to relax. That's all. There's no curse. There's not even elements. You can teach the player how to play the game in Zen mode, and then later have it so you can unlock Nightmare mode from Zen mode. Zen mode will kind of get you prepared. It will teach you how to play the game and just relax and have fun. And if you're a hardcore player and want to have some serious challenge and fun, then you can go on and play Nightmare mode. So how do I want Zen mode to actually be? Well, right now it's just pretty much Nightmare mode without any of the nightmares. I would like to make Zen mode eventually actually very Zen. I have these awesome ideas in my head of having like a 3D background with waving grass and a tree on a hill. And another really cool thing I thought of was the ability to change through seasons. So chaining the cards fuel the movement of seasons. So you can move from, say, spring to summer to fall and then winter and then it cycles. I think that would be really awesome and very relaxing. Another thing I thought of that would be really fun, really interesting, I think, would be the option to enable or disable nature sounds like crickets or birds or the wind or, things like that. I'm in the process right now of having some artwork redone in the game. I came to a sudden realization of how I could restructure the element manager to make a lot more sense in Nightmare mode. The current version has the element manager to the top right, out of the player's view, with a really small font text. I suddenly realized that I could make the board of the game the actual element manager in and of itself. For one, you could increase the size of the board if you needed to, so you could have a 6x4 or even a 7x4 board. You could also move the harmony text at the very top and center so that it's really big, it's really visible. Another thing I plan on doing in Nightmare mode is taking some things I've learned from Zen mode and applying them into Nightmare mode. One of those is the feeling of an infinite play level. Currently, the Nightmare mode has a series of levels, so you play one level. Once your deck is empty and you've cleared the board, then you go to another level. I've realized when playing Zen mode that it's a lot more fun to have just one really big level. When you run out of cards from your deck, it shuffles them and gives you more cards, and you just keep playing like that. So then this sort of changes then the style of how Nightmare mode works. In the previous iteration of Didgery, in the previous versions of Didgery, you could figure out how well you were doing by your levels. Like, oh my goodness, I reached level 48 before losing. Now, if there's no more levels, how do you do that? The best way of doing it is by having a timer of sorts. Not one that counts down, but one that counts how long you've played. The longer you can stave off the curse and survive, the better player you are. And that's really what it is. That's what the levels were sort of a metric for. So if you just replace those with a time of how well you've done, then it makes a lot more sense. This also allows me to remove the somewhat unnecessary stats screen between each level. That never really made much sense to me. I don't really know why I ever really added it in. I think to give players incentive, but I don't really know if it worked. The styling of the stats board is weird, and it's kind of just a nuisance. Mostly I'm just trying to skip it so I can play the next level. I never really cared about it. So an infinite level, I think, would feel really nice. Multiply this with the fact that now the game board is the element manager and it's right in front of your face. It should improve a number of the flaws that were inherent to the Nightmare mode. Another element of Didgery that people very much disliked was that you always lost. I would sort of like to even that out. Make it so that you can actually fight against the curse. One of the current ideas is to have status cards. We have one status card already, and that's the Guardian card. When you release the Guardian card, it restores the health of an element if it's broken, or if it's not broken, then it protects it from the curse for a limited amount of time. And I would like to have more cards like that. You have cards that decrease the power of the curse, or that damage the curse, so that it makes it easier to play. And if you can do that, then you stand a fighting chance. You can last for a very long time. Speaking of modes, there's another mode I thought of that could be really, really cool. It's actually a multiplayer mode. This is a mode that I call battle mode. Each player has a certain amount of health. Chains damage the other player's health. And there's a limited amount of time on move. So basically it would work like this. Say it's your turn, you have 10, 15, 20 seconds. You look for a chain, you make the chain damages the other player's health. It's sort of like an RPG, okay? And then it's the other player's turn. Then they can find a chain and hurt your health. I think that's a really interesting idea. I would like to implement it. I don't know how long it will take to implement, but it's definitely something that I plan to put in Didgery. It would just be awesome. Now, it would be just kind of dull, or it would get dull if that's all it was. So I need to add in status cards, like status ailments, like, oh no, you have poison or something, that decreases your health over time, or regains your health, or defensive cards. Well, that's pretty much all I can think of right now. You can follow me on Twitter at Lotus Games if you feel like it, and you can subscribe to this channel if you want to see more of these potentially awkward podcasts. Thank you.